Welcome back to my channel and welcome to my small business negotiation course. Throughout this 5-part course, I'm going to be teaching you the foundational skills and mindset management tools that can help you negotiate for better rates, lower prices, and better partnerships. The course is designed specifically for entrepreneurs and small business owners because negotiation is quite often the skill that's standing between you and a profitable business. Now, I have a free workbook that goes along with this course. I've included the link to that in the show notes below. But for just $20 Canadian, you can purchase a comprehensive version of that workbook, which includes a set of templates that you can use anytime you have to negotiate and extra video content to help you prepare for a tough negotiation. So the link to that version is also in the show notes below. Now, this course is part of the Fearless Negotiation Project. That's my commitment to eliminating barriers to effective negotiation education, specifically for women and folks from historically marginalized backgrounds. If you're not already subscribed, do that now, and then check out my channel for more free negotiation courses and workshops that can help you leverage the power of negotiation to practice radical self-respect in all areas of your life. If at any time you have questions, please put them in the comments below. I promise I will respond to each of the questions personally. Now, in the meantime, let's get started with part 1 of the course. Negotiation is a skill. It's often overlooked and misunderstood, but it's foundational for business owners. Just like strong communication skills, you'll find that enhancing your understanding and practice of negotiation can help you in many areas of your life. For example, with clients, suppliers, partners, employees, and then with your spouse, your family, your extended family, your friends, in your community. Negotiation has obvious monetary value to our businesses. You want to increase your bottom line this year? Start negotiating as a regular practice. You'll see your profits increase. And you'll start to minimize the impact of price increases from your suppliers. Now, you might be wondering why we don't talk about this very often and what makes it different for women. So let me tell you. Negotiation is an often overlooked and misunderstood, but foundational skill, which is helpful in business and in life. Just like strong communication skills, you'll find that enhancing your understanding and practice of negotiation can help you in many areas of your life. With clients, suppliers, partners, employees, with your spouse, extended family, friends, and in your community. Negotiation also has an obvious monetary value. Want to increase your bottom line this year? Start by negotiating as a regular practice, and you'll see your profits increase, and you'll be able to minimize the impact of price increases from your suppliers. You might be thinking, why is this the first time I'm hearing about this? And what makes it different for women? Well, in 2021, the Women's Entrepreneurial Knowledge Hub in Canada published a review of the entrepreneurial ecosystem through a gendered lens. I want to warn you, the results are upsetting to me. Women do business differently, but we are not well supported by Canada's entrepreneurial ecosystem. And if you're from another country, I'm afraid you probably have a very similar experience. When we look in Canada, we see that of entrepreneurs, just over 15% of business owners identify as women. So gender norms in place, let's assume that the other roughly 85% are mostly men. Under Canada's definition of entrepreneurship, solopreneurs, of which 38.3% are women, don't count. I don't count. This means that the supports in place assume only 15% of business owners are women. Proportionally, this means that business support is biased toward providing tailored needs for a majority of men. So I'm going to caveat that by saying that most jurisdictions provide some terrific and targeted support for women. But that represents a tiny proportion of the small business support that exists across our ecosystem, which is primarily structured around the needs of men. The truth is, women get into business for very different reasons than men. We prioritize sustainability and social enterprise over financial return and profit maximization. Over 70% of women entrepreneurs are motivated by making a difference, and 90% of women-owned businesses are in the service sector. We get into business because we have a talent or we see a gap in society that needs filling. But given our life circumstances, we tend to reject the growth at all costs mindset that's prevalent among most male entrepreneurs. Instead, we embrace a more holistic, balanced approach that suits the circumstances of our lives. But of course, the system is designed to support wealth creation over social impact. It's built around a person who can hustle 18 hours a day, not one who has to balance child and elder care with their small business. So as we start to talk about negotiation, I wanted to start here by planting the seed that you're not well supported within the ecosystem, but it's not your fault. and you're not alone. One of the key recommendations coming out of the report is that the entrepreneurship ecosystem needs to do a better job in helping address skills gaps for women. And the key areas they talked about were financial skills and negotiation skills. But because the gaps in the system are so stark, the report actually calls on women in entrepreneurs to take the initiative and focus some learning in these areas themselves. So I'm glad you're here, and that's why I'm so excited to share this information with you. It should be important to you because there are some pretty big risks associated with avoiding negotiation over the long term. If you're in a service industry, chances are you started working at a lower cost than the more experienced professionals in your industry, and that's totally normal. But if you've been at it for a long time, long enough to be considered competent at least, if you have positive feedback, if you have more than 3 stars on your Google reviews, then I want you to take a look at your rates. Are you still charging as though you're a newbie? When you do this in the beginning, you do it to build your client base and reputation. Yes, but over time, you have to ask yourself a hard question. Do you want to have the reputation of being the cheapest? Or do you want to be known as a high quality service provider who's worth every penny? Over time, if your rates lag behind industry standards, you'll become known as a great deal instead of a great provider. You'll attract clients who want to nickel and dime you, and you'll probably get overwhelmed with small contracts and lots of administration. Now, keeping your rates low, whether in service or products, also has a negative impact on your entire industry. As an example, let's look at the race to the bottom that we've seen in the airline industry. I remember taking an economy flight when I was about 7 years old. It was from Winnipeg at the center of Canada to Vancouver, which is on our west coast. Now, it was a true economy flight. We stopped in Regina, Saskatoon, Edmonton, and Calgary before landing in Vancouver. But that was fine. The seats were roomy. There was tons of legroom, not that it mattered to me. And we got a full breakfast every time the plane took off, which seemed really cool when I was 7. Now, fast forward to where we are now. Think about the last flight you took. Every inch of space is accounted for every single add-on. Now, I want you to think about your industry. Do you want to contribute to a race to the bottom in terms of quality within your sector? And what would that look like 5 or 10 years out? Charging less than you are right now, nickel and diming your clients, scrimping and saving and having to work twice as hard to squeeze every ounce of profit out of your business? Because here's the problem. It's not getting any less expensive to own your own business. Whether it's service or product-based, the services and supplies that you depend on to run your business are subject to inflation just like everything else. If you're not prepared to raise your rates and negotiate with your customers and your suppliers, your profit margin will only get tighter and tighter. Sure, you might have gotten into business to serve, to help people, to make a difference, but that does not need to come at the cost of your own quality of life. In the end, not negotiating isn't good for anyone. Sure, your clients might benefit from low rates for a while, but you will lose their respect. And you'll lose your own self-respect because avoiding difficult conversations never makes them easier. Your costs will increase, your workload will too. But the biggest cost will be the regret and resentment that begins to cloud your interactions with your suppliers, your partners, and your clients. Now, nothing bad has ever happened because women have too much money. A recent American study demonstrated that women spend nearly 90% of their disposable income in ways that have positive impacts on the world. They invest in their families, their local communities, and in charitable organizations that are working toward a more inclusive and sustainable future. But let's talk about the benefits of negotiation from the specific perspective of women entrepreneurs. Before we even talk about the financial impacts of negotiation, I want to talk about what happens in your mind when you start to negotiate regularly. In negotiation, as with many skills in life, practice allows you to build both confidence and competence. When I say that, I'm drawing on extensive psychological research into self-efficacy, which is your belief in your ability to do something. Now, self-efficacy is an important element of your personality because it's one that you can deliberately strengthen through practice. As with any skill that you learn, whether it's to drive a car or manage your finances, you typically start with a low or moderate level of self-efficacy. And this is because you haven't practiced, and your self-belief is largely based on your perception of what it might be like. So you incorporate any previous experiences you've had with what you know about the skill and what society tells you about how likely you are to be good at that skill. In other words, your self-confidence around negotiation depends on whether you've negotiated in the past, how that went, how knowledgeable you are about effective negotiation, and what society tells you about women as negotiators. As I'm saying that, it sounds like building confidence in negotiation might be a tough hill to climb, but it's actually the opposite. Self-efficacy is incredibly easy to build. You're starting today by building knowledge around the process and strategy of effective negotiation. As soon as you finish this workshop, you're going to start practicing in small ways with the tools in your toolkit. And with every small success that you have, you build your belief in your ability to push a little bit harder next time. The final thing I want to share about self-efficacy is that once you've built it, it's here to stay. So even if you have the odd negotiation that doesn't go your way, which does happen from time to time, your confidence will still be there to support you. You just need to brush it off and think back to the string of successful negotiations that you've already had. Second benefit of negotiation that I like to highlight is the value of attracting the clients that you want to work with the most. When you negotiate, whether it's for financial benefits or for terms that you need to effectively deliver on your products and services, you demonstrate a level of self-respect that sets an expectation for your clients. I don't know about you, but I work with clients who value me, not the ones who just pick me because I'm the lowest cost provider. Because as you probably know, when you're in the low cost game, you find yourself nickel and diming your products and services for clients who, if they were honest, you probably don't enjoy working with anyway. But when you make a practice of negotiating for what you want and need to effectively deliver at an appropriate price, you actually learn a lot about the people you're negotiating with. Yes, sometimes it starts you down a path of the beginning of the end for a business relationship that maybe wasn't all that great to start with. And over time, that's a really great thing, because if the vast majority of your clients do value your time and your work, and they compensate you appropriately, you will have less administration, less stress, and more joy inside of your work. Now, the most obvious benefit of negotiation is profitability, your ability to increase your revenue and hold your cost increases to a minimum. Inflation affects us all, but when you practice negotiation regularly, you have the opportunity to make gains in your revenue and minimize the impact of the additional costs that are being passed on to you through your supply chain. I want to be really clear here. Making money should be the primary purpose of your business. That's a good thing. Too many women feel shameful about saying that they want to generate wealth. Yes, 70% of us get into business to make a difference, but making a difference and generating wealth are not mutually exclusive. We only get to make a difference and keep doing it if we make money at it. Now, if you don't care about the money, that's lovely, but don't call it a business, call it a hobby, call it volunteerism. But if it is a business, if you're doing it to support yourself, build wealth, or to have a bit of extra money in your bank account and take your family on a trip, then I want you to treat it as a business and treat yourself with respect. Embrace the idea that making money is the primary purpose of your business. Be proud of the impact you're making, and know that the greater your profit, the more impact you can have. Negotiation is a foundational skill for business. And since you have a business, it is your responsibility to negotiate on behalf of that business. The final benefit of negotiation is mathematical, and the more we do it, the greater the compound benefits we gain. This is a really important principle that I want you to deeply understand. So I'm going to break it down with a detailed example, because once you see it, you can never unsee it. And I promise you, it's going to change your perspective and motivate you to negotiate regularly. So let's say that we have two entrepreneurs doing similar work with long-term clients. And in year one, they both earn $100,000. Entrepreneur A is excited by that amount. And quite frankly, she can't believe that people paid her that much. Entrepreneur Z, or Z, if you're in the US, is also really excited that she made that much and totally astonished that people are so enthusiastic about her business. The difference between the two is that Z took this workshop and in year two negotiated rate increases with all of her clients, which netted out to a 10% increase overall. So in year two, all things being equal, A generated $100,000 in revenue and Z made $110,000. Now, in the following year, Z kept going. Sometimes she'd get a 20% increase. With some clients, she was only able to negotiate 5%. But throughout the year, her negotiation efforts paid off and she generated another 10% increase. So as for year 3, A is still unsure that her clients are going to pay her more. So she keeps everything even and she continues to generate that 100K. Now, what's not on this slide is that A's expenses have gone up. So $100,000 doesn't really feel like it did a few years ago. Now, Z, on the other hand, continues with her strategy. It's not bold, it's not audacious. She just makes a point of negotiating every time. And so her base is now $121,000 a year. Again, this is assuming all things are equal and neither entrepreneur has really changed anything in their business. As we move into year 4, A is still earning 100K, but Z is up to 133K. And in year 5, that gap widens to over $46,000. Now, if you're a math wizard, you're probably ahead of me, and you know that the cumulative impact of negotiating a 10% increase year over year has a huge impact on Zed's bottom line. In 5 years, A has earned $500,000 in revenue, but Zed has earned $610,510. That amounts to a net increase of over $110,000 and translates to an overall gain of just over 22% of revenue. Now, if you keep going, by year 10, Zed is earning almost $236,000, and A is still at 100K. That's a net revenue increase of $593,000 and a net gain of 59%. So let that sink in for a moment as you pull out your workbook and turn to the first exercise, because it's time to start applying this thinking to yourself. So in your workbook, you're going to find a worksheet that looks similar to this. And step 1 for you is really just picking a revenue level to work with. So if you have a good idea of your revenue last year, use that number. If you're not sure, just take your best guess or pick the number that you're working towards this year. It doesn't really matter. We just want to work with one specific number. So write that number in all 5 years in the current U column. If you need to get organized at any point, just pause the video. So you're writing that number in year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 under current U. Now head over to the future U column and use the same number and write it down next to year 1. Okay, so for this exercise, we're going to assume the same conditions that I used in the example, an overall increase of 10%. So to get your year 2 revenue number, just multiply year 1 by 1.10 and write that number down next to year 2 in the future U column. That's the equivalent of year 1's revenue plus 10%. I've also put the calculation beside the chart. So you'll continue down the column, multiplying year 2 by 1.10 to get year 3. You'll multiply year 3 by 1.10 to get year 4, and the same for year 5. Now, if you haven't already pulled up the calculator function on your phone, you want to do that now because the math actually gets a little bit more tricky as you move down the column. So now is a really great time to pause the video and take your time and work through the math on here. The revenue for years 1 through 5 in both columns, take a moment to add them up. Again, just pause the video and take as much time as you need. There's really no rush here. Final piece of math that I'll ask you to do is to calculate the difference between current U, who doesn't typically negotiate, and future U, who makes it a regular habit. So take that total from the future U column, the 5-year total, and subtract the 5-year total from the current U column. That's the 5-year impact of negotiating just on that original amount. Now, since I'm recording this and I can't hear you, I'm assuming that your jaw has dropped to the floor and you need a moment to compose yourself. Take that time. But before I get back to, or before we move on to the next video, I have one more step that I need you to take. I want you to think about the impact of that negotiation on your life. So go ahead and maybe close your eyes, unless you're driving or doing something that might be dangerous with your eyes closed. I want you to imagine that you are 5 years out and you've done exactly what that math showed. You've increased your revenue and you've put more money in your pocket. Think about that amount of money. What has changed for you with that additional revenue? Did you take your kids on a vacation to Disney World? Buy yourself a flashy car? Invest in a new home or cottage? Get a maid? Or maybe reinvest in something that would make your business even more successful, including investing in yourself. I want you to visualize yourself. I want you to visualize yourself pulling out your debit card and paying for those things, not on credit, but with money in your bank account. See your kids' faces when you tell them they're going to Disney World. Imagine what it feels like turning the key and walking into that dream property for the first time. If you had that extra revenue in your bank account, what would it mean to you? So at this point, this brings us to the end of video 1. I encourage you to pause the video or end the video and set a timer for about 5 minutes to think about and write down the ideas on your wish list. And when you're ready to move on, you can move on to the next video.